This episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast is brought to you in partnership with ministryleague.com. We would love for more people to discover this show, so please rate and review us on iTunes or your podcast provider. Feel free to share on your social media and subscribe at benandtravis.com for the free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living.
Welcome into the Helping Healing Humor podcast with Ben and Travis. Ask Lonnie Jones Anything edition. Another volume with our good friend Lonnie Jones, who might just be the Yoda of certainly with Skits with the Truth, but he might fill that role for other things as well. But I just love listening to his podcast, Keeping Up with Jones. It's an amazing podcast. I challenge you to go check that out. One of the easiest ways to find it, benandtravis.com/friends. And you can click on the link and hear all of his wonderful adventures right there. It is a must listen to every Tuesday. I was catching up today while I exercised. I was out running down the road. And I just feel like if Lonnie Jones's voice can be heard, people are just going to leave me alone. So, so I listen for protection. From anybody who might hear the voice, they go run screaming into the wilderness. But Ben, you doing okay?
I am doing excellent today. It's been a good day, ready for the summertime. And by the time this one's airing, it will be summertime. People are going to be in the midst of all their crazy plans and all the good stuff. And so I'm glad it's summer. I'm glad to have Lonnie Jones with us again. He's like the Paul Harvey of our generation. If you're not listening to his podcast, you need to be, because there's nobody that can spin a story and tell a story like Lonnie Jones. And with that voice, it's fantastic. So go listen to his stories. There's always a good message at the end, little facts, concepts, application. I think he says that at the beginning of the podcast. But Lonnie, we're glad to have you with us. How things
awesome
going?
To be with you guys. Two of my favorite people on the planet. I love you guys.
We're right in the middle of our 30-day challenge for June, second annual, inspired by Lonnie Jones and one of our Ask Lonnie Jones Anything podcast. You were asked on the podcast about working out. You said, hey, if you're not going to do it at home, you're not going to do it at a gym. And so that inspired us, and we're right in the middle of that. So we know several guys whose lives have been changed by the 30-day challenge. So thank you for that, Lonnie.
And coming up after that will be the July 10th Batify 5K. That's going to be happening at Mars Hill Bible School this year. And so we hope that you guys will join us for that as well. So, Lonnie, we've got a few questions for you. I think Travis is going to start it off for us with a couple of questions, or with a question that is very deep and maybe a very difficult question for you. So this one might stump you. I don't know. We'll see.
Parkour _web with 2 B's. How does Mount Everest have snow if the clouds are under it?
So I have been guilty of saying there's no such thing as a stupid question. There's no snow on Mount Everest. That white stuff is yeti poop. And so not to worry about it. Okay, that's all there is to it. The real answer, and you'll have to, I'm off the top of my head, our weather comes from a layer of the atmosphere called the troposphere. My wife's an earth science teacher. The troposphere extends up to about 33,000 feet. Mount Everest is at about 29, maybe in some change. And so it fits under the troposphere where weather occurs, and you don't necessarily have to have clouds for there to be snow. It's a function of moisture and condensation. And then the clouds often are above Everest, and sometimes they're seen, below the peak. You can have clouds sit down in the valley here in Paint Rock, and they're sitting on the road, And so, the clouds move up and down depending on certain atmospheric conditions. But the main answer is that it's still in the troposphere, which extends to 33,000 feet in the atmosphere. And so it's well inside the area where we get most of our weather.
Jackie Jones for the win.
There you go. And Lonnie, would you ever climb Mount Everest?
It'd be a negative.
Because you don't technically, I guess there's some parts of it you climb, but it's somewhat more of a hike.
It's a
right?
Awesome endurance hike. Once you get past, I think it's 25,000 feet, you start to die. You're not designed to be up there. If you flew up there on a helicopter, which you can't, and got out at the surface at the top, you'd start dying. Your body's not designed to be up there. You can be in the best shape in the world, and the pulmonary edemas or the altitude stuff can happen to you. You could climb it, today and be great. You climb it tomorrow and die. It's a vicious endurance hike. I think close to the summit, there's like a 5.6 or a 5.7 technical climb called the Hillary Step on one of the approaches. There's several approaches up it, but I got better things to do with my money and my time. I got a month to do it. I got $60,000 to get the permit.
I was about to say it's $60,000, and what, 1 in 10 people die?
1 in 10 has been the average. If you've seen any pictures of climbing season, they're lined up like the Stones are in town. And to think that I could get killed because of your incompetency, you're standing up here waiting to traverse, one of the traverses, or maybe waiting on the Hillary Step, and you've got some guy who's a pocket climber. He's paid the money and they drug him up there, but he really didn't have the technical skills to do it. And you're waiting on some fool to do.
Storm comes in.
I start throwing people off. I'm sorry. It just, I'd start cutting stuff and chunking.
You can get killed by our incompetence right here on the flat ground, right?
I've flown by Everest 3 times when I was in Nepal. I flew by it, and it's beautiful. There are clouds below it. I believe there were a few clouds above it. So just to confirm what Lonnie said, but it's a beautiful scene. I don't want to see it from anything but airplane or possibly from the ground looking up. I'm good there. It was beautiful enough to see, but top of the world. So
sweet.
I ran 3 miles at 8,000 feet, and I've elk hunted from a base camp at 10 up to 13, and it's brutal when you're not acclimated. And that step from 13,000 into the 20s,
tough.
And I think there's as much oxygen there. It's just the pressure is such that it's hard to get it into your lungs. There's some technical definition that it's not actually thinner air. The air is homostasis or ubiquitous. You'll have to look up the technical definition for it, but it's the air pressure that keeps you from breathing like you're supposed to. And then you get hypoxia. You start having illusions and delusions, and you can't think straight. And oh man!
And there'll be a vocab
I read the book
list.
Into Thin Air and stayed perpetually mad at the selfishness of the people on that mountain.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Well, there'll be a vocab list at the end of this podcast for all the words that Lonnie has used
Google
that
links.
Travis and I don't understand. But I'm sure the rest of you will. But we're anyway. So yeah, there's the answer for Everest for sure.
Great question, dude. Great question.
So here's the next one, and we've already mentioned your podcast, Keeping Up with Jones, Lonnie Jones Adventure. Question has been asked: what made you want to start a podcast?
Oh wow! So I used to write these little articles, and had quite a collection of them, and they were real short, instant things. And several people were like, "Hey, Lonnie, you need to be podcasting. You need to be on. We got a guy at church who works in our sound room who works for Facebook." And he said, "If you're not doing this, you're missing out on some opportunities to reach some folks." And then Lonnie Beth was like, "Dad, you need to be telling some of the stories." And folks do sometimes just want to hear stories.
Mm-hmm.
And, I have a reputation as a storyteller. But if you listen to a lot of my lessons, the lesson is built around scripture, not around stories.
Right.
Now, here's some young guys, they'll start their lesson with this elaborate 15-minute story. You only use a story to illustrate something. Anything you can illustrate, you understand. If you don't understand, you can't illustrate it. And so I just got folks interested in, and they said, why don't you do some more of this? And rather than write them, because publication is so limited, I started reading these little articles and then started creating new ones. And just, I guess, because I didn't want these stories to go untold, because I enjoyed writing them. I enjoyed reliving them as I've been reading them. On Father's Day, I'm going to release 53 episodes at once. I found a folder that contained every article I ever wrote about Lonnie Beth. From finding out I was going to be a dad, to walking her down the aisle, to a couple of things about being a grandfather. They're called the Dad Files, and I'm going to launch them as an anthology on Father's Day. So I hope folks will look into that and maybe have some benefit. Kind of dad devotionals, a weekly thing for a year. Maybe it'll have some content that's valuable.
Dude, there is no, I've come to understand there is no whipped like having a daughter whipped. Like, dude, I don't even know how to explain it. I don't know, and so I'm looking forward to that because
I sit here at this computer and just cry reading back through those things. So yeah, you're in the daughter club. Ben's in the daughter club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember driving home from Dallas and somewhere along Memphis, kind of having that discussion. Like, man, you just got too many stories not to be sharing them. So I'm very thankful, and I know there are a lot of people who are thankful for your podcast. That question was brought by the guy who actually won the Awake You Sleeper sticker, Sambo, which is always great, right? Sambo. I mean, that's just great. Sambo _ Elrod. Thanks for the question.
Well, people have been super kind, and I get a lot of very kind things said about it, and people are sharing it. One of the cops was teasing me the other day, said I was running, listening to your podcast, and I had to quit because I was crying because I couldn't breathe because I was sniffling up. And I was like, well, all right then. And another
Pretty
guy,
good when you make a cop cry. That's awesome.
He's a young man with a young family, and I think it was about maybe the pine tree monster or the butterfly stories.
Oh.
But anyway,
Brutal.
But thank you guys for propping that up and for sharing it. And, Travis is my #1 fan club on my podcast, so I appreciate all the love you guys give it too.
Well, it's easy to love. It's easy to love.
It's great. It's great.
This is interesting because it's not actually a guy who asked this next question. But you're about to help. I think you're going to help some guys out here, maybe, or maybe you'll just lead them down the wrong path. That's funny too. But the next question I have is one from one of my students, Jess McWhirter, Jess _ Lynn88. What's the best pickup line that you can think of? Whether you used it or not, we know that's been so many moons ago. But what's one of the best ones you've ever heard?
You are guaranteed to never go out with a girl that you do not ask. And so I think there's a Alan Jackson song that says, don't fall in love as she's walking away. She'll say yes or she'll say no. If she says yes, go out with her. She says no, she did you a favor. You didn't spend your money or waste your time. Ask somebody else.
Yes.
And dating is about finding out what you have in common with people. If you're dating and when you quit dating, you don't end up with a new friend, you're dating wrong. It's either becoming too physical, it's becoming too emotional. Dating should be, hey, we hung out, we did some stuff, we had some mutual interest, but we're divergent on either our value system, on our mythos, on our worldview, or, hey, we're compatible. And so I think that it's important to realize that dating is not about winning or losing. It's about discovering, likes and friendships. And, I'm sorry to disappoint you guys, but I don't know that I have a good pickup line. I did have a kid ask me at a camp one time, we were talking about dating, and he said, well, how do you handle rejection? And I said, I'm sorry, you'll have to define that term for me. It's terrible. I know it's terrible. And, if the right people are listening to this podcast, they'll say, hey, I shot him down in flames. So, and as a teenager, everybody's awkward. We look back and we tell the stories of being Jay Smooth. Nah.
No, I don't.
We were just as uninformed and stupid as everybody else. And we did dumb stuff and got our information from the wrong source. And there's, oh man, I could tell some seriously embarrassing moments, but it would offend the girls that they involved. So we just don't talk about those things.
Well, I always, like when I was in high school and I'd have, I know y'all think, I am kind of a shy person, right?
Introvert.
Scared. Mm-hmm. But people would ask me, hey, would you go talk to her for me? And I was always like, if I'm going to talk to her, I'm going to talk to her for me. Like, sorry, but I ain't a go-between,
And what person in their right mind would send Travis to be their ambassador?
Yeah, that would be terrible.
That's the question. Like, who's going to send you, like, Travis, I want you to go talk to that girl for me. Unless it was a setup for like, she's going to be so put off by him that she's going to turn towards me. That may have been the key.
I think that was probably more likely.
How does that work?
One time in college, I got two of my buddies to stop and sort of harass this girl that was walking from the library back to her dorm, and then I came out of nowhere and kicked their butts. And they made great stunt players. I tossed them into the hedges and all kinds of stuff. And then I walked her back to her dorm. It was a raw setup, which was pretty cool.
Somebody today, we were talking and they were like, you had your really smart, we were talking about awards at school and, that our kids don't get that many awards in school. And somebody said, well, you had, back in the day, you had your jocks and then you had your smart kids. And I was like, they said, somebody, you fit in one of those. I was like, no, I didn't fit in either one of those. I was somewhere in no man's land. I don't know what you call it, but I wasn't that smart and I wasn't a jock either. So there you are.
I had a really weird dating philosophy. I really didn't go steady. I felt like if I was interesting enough or treated you well enough, you wouldn't be interested in anybody else. And if you dated somebody else, I really didn't care about the comparison. You would not be treated more kindly or more gentlemanly than you would be in my presence, and you wouldn't be safe with anybody else but me. And so maybe that was hubris, maybe it was arrogance, but I took it very seriously that I was taking on the responsibility to care for a man's daughter when she was in my company. And I just didn't think anybody would be as polite or as gentlemanly as I was.
By the way, you ended up with a pretty amazing lady. So Jackie is an amazing woman. Last question for you, Lonnie, is what is your favorite restaurant and favorite food? And they may be at the same restaurant or the same place or not. And who asked that question?
That was Nick Hardiman, also one of my sophomores. I guess he's a junior now. But
I think I'd have to say that it's a toss-up between three places. Can I do that?
Sure. I think so, and I'm hoping it's some of the ones I'm thinking about.
Heart 8.
Yep.
City Butcher.
Yep.
Texas de Brazil. Those are my three.
I go with all three of those.
And I guess I prefer to eat steak, a good ribeye, a good marbled ribeye, as out as much as anything. Although I like, if I could just eat anything I want to eat all the time, I would eat more Crystal burgers than anything else. I love those little
Hey, now Crystal Chicks, the chicks are pretty amazing too.
No, that's not original stuff. That's messing with something. You take those Crystal double cheeseburgers and you buy, when I'm allowed to, and I'm not often, but you go through a drive-thru, you get 36 of those, and you get on a boat to Bowfish, and you eat, some for supper, some for middle evening, midnight,
some for breakfast
in the morning. Yeah, I like the barbecue places in Texas and Springfield, and then Texas de Brazil here in town. And then I guess my favorite, just if I could just eat it without penalty, I eat a bunch of Crystal burgers, man. I know that's terrible and pathetic, but I do. I've been eating some rock and roll sushi here lately too. I've been really enjoying not real sushi, but the tempura shrimp And they have a thing at Rock and Roll Sushi. They got this side of these 8 large shrimp. That's good stuff. Thank the people who called in or wrote in and asked the questions there. Your questions were as entertaining as the answers, I think.
Oh, yeah.
What
Good
makes them
stuff.
like
Young
that?
people are already loaded, ready for questions, of course. But the other part about that is we need somebody who's willing. And Lonnie, you're always willing. So we certainly appreciate that.
Thanks for being with us for this episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast. Be sure to download our free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living, at benandtravis.com and receive all of our Helping Healing and Humor extra content directly in your inbox. We look forward to having you join us at the same Ben and Travis time, same Ben and Travis channel.